Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. So today we're going to show you how to add on a Raspberry Pi Zero to your Pixelcade LED marquee. And in this example, this is actually an At Games Ultimate Legends marquee, but this could be for any of the Pixelcade units. So the nice thing about the Raspberry Pi Zero, it's nice and small. You can actually get them for $10, so they're pretty cheap without shipping 10 bucks. So if you got a Pixelcade for At Games unit that was bought sometime in May of 2020, then it's going to come installed with these little headers, the little mounting headers for the Raspberry Pi Zero. If you got one before that, no problem. You can just do some, it's actually perfectly flat on the bottom of the Pi Zero, so you can just put some sticky tape and just stick it on there. That'll work just fine. It's a very light board. So, but anyhow, this particular one, I do have the headers. So you'll just take the Pi Zero, like so in this orientation, and we're just going to plop them on like this. And then we'll have these four little nylon nut screws. These are M2.5, by the way, which is kind of an odd size to get. The other side, they're M3, so these are that's just what the Raspberry Pi designed, M2.5. Anyhow, we include those in the kit, so you don't have to get them yourself. So just take these guys, and you can just hand screw them on here. It doesn't have to be very tight. So you've got your Pi board here. So two things we got to do. First is we got to supply power. So power is going to be the connection right here that says power in. So if you take a little bit closer look right there, that's a little hard to see on the camera, but it basically says power in, and then this one says USB. So the USB is what we're going to use to connect to Pixelcade. The power in, we just need to power it. Now with the power, there's two options you can go. Number one is you can use any normal Raspberry Pi power brick, or you can use like just a normal phone charger, right? So this is just a phone charger head lying around. Key is it's 5 volts, other end is USB. So I can just pop that in, and actually I'm not going to plug it in right now. Let's unplug this from the wall because we don't want to power it on just yet. I'm just going to pop that in there. So that's option number one. The downside of this option is you have the power for Pixelcade, which is its own 5 volts, 10 amp power supply, and then you have the second power thing to deal with. Now, if you have a power strip set up, it's no big deal. Just put this on your power strip, problem solved. But if you don't, and you want it to be a little, basically less power cords, you can get rid of this. And if you're a little handy with soldering, you can basically make your own splitter cable, because the Raspberry Pixelcade power brick has plenty of power actually. So this cable, and I have a separate video on how to make this cable, but basically you're just splicing 3 wires. So what I did here was on one end, I sacrificed an extra micro USB cable I had lying around. So that's that one. And then we have 2 pigtails on this end. These are DC jacks. This is a male, this is a female. So basically it's just 3 wires spliced together. So if you can solder a little bit, it's a pretty easy wire to make. And then again, it's nice because then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug Pixelcade here. I'm going to plug this one in. And then I'm going to take this guy, this end here, and plug it into the power on our Pi USB. And then lastly, this end here I'm going to plug into Pixelcade. And then this last cable here, I'm going to plug into my Pixelcade power brick, which in this example is here. So we'll just plug that in. So that's if you have your splitter cable. Okay, and then basically we can just kind of just tidy everything up. We've got these zip ties here. But for now, most people don't want to, or don't, are not set up to solder. That's fine. So just get any separate power supply. Any separate phone charger will work just fine. Old iPhone chargers you have lying around the house, a lot of people use those. and just pop that in. Again, let me unplug from the wall, pop this in, like so. And then we need this other thing, which is called a mini USB OTG, or OTG is USB on the go. So we need one of these cables, because you notice that the cable on Pixelcade is a full-size USB cable. It's called a USB A to A cable. So one end is going to go into Pixelcade, like so. Make sure this toggle switch is on USB and not Bluetooth. And so basically we got to connect this big USB connector to this little guy. So the only way to do that is with this little mini USB OTG adapter. These are like $2, maybe $5 if you get them on Amazon. I'll include a link. And then just pop that in here and then plug it in like so. Now there is one tricky part of this cable, and that is, you notice this has a right angle connection like this. So the problem is, and I unfortunately got a big batch of these cables, but this is also a right angle, but it goes the other way. So the problem is this one, see that? That can only connect this way, and there's not enough room because it's basically, get a closer view. So on this one, the right angle only plugs in this way, but it's basically getting into the way of this guy. So it's not going to plug in. Bottom line, it's not going to work. So that is a little tricky. I will try to find a link to the correct one so you don't make the same mistake I made and buy the wrong size, the wrong cable with the wrong right angle orientation. So just be careful about that one. Okay, so then it's just a matter of plugging this in here. And then this, we would go here, back to our Pixelcade board. Now that we've got everything wired the way we want it, let's go ahead and take our Raspberry Pi micro SD card, take it to our computer, and image it with the Pixelcade image for the Raspberry Pi for this setup. So I'm going to go over to my laptop, and I'm going to use a program called Baleena Etcher. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And I'm going to burn to this SD card the specific image for this project that has Pixelcade on there already set up and configured, and then a little nice Wi-Fi setup program, which I'll show you in a second. So we've gone ahead and burned our image. So now let's go ahead and take our micro SD card out. By the way, Pixelcade ships with one of these little micro SD card adapters, so you can just leverage that one. Let's go ahead and pop our micro SD card into the Pi. And by the way, this also works with a full-size Pi as well. So if you already have a full-size Pi, it just takes up more space, but it will also work just fine. There's a different image for that that's in the instructions. Note you'll have to move these two mounting stands just one up. There's two little notches right here for it. But for right now, we're doing the Pi Zero. So let's go ahead and apply power and turn on our Pi Zero. And we'll give this about a minute. And what's going to happen is the image is set up by default, because it's always kind of a pain in the ass to configure the Wi-Fi in the Raspberry Pi, because right now we don't want to have to hook up a keyboard and monitor. A, it's a pain, and B, we just don't have that many connections in the Pi Zero. So cool thing about this image is when I boot up, it's actually going to boot itself up as a wireless access point. So it's going to advertise its own Wi-Fi called Pixelcade Setup. We're going to connect to that, and then from that, we can tell it to connect to your normal Wi-Fi network. So it makes it pretty easy. Now you notice that while this is booting up, if I turn it over, Pixelcade is just going to cycle through its normal images here. So that's normal. Okay, so now let's go ahead and switch over here. Now you can do this when we turn off the lights, make it easier to see. You can do this from your phone. I'm just using my iPad just because it's a little easier to see. But you'll notice that there's now a new Wi-Fi being advertised called Pixelcade Setup. So let's go ahead and hit that and connect. There's no password, so it's just going to connect. Okay, so we're connected. Then I'm going to go to a browser. And there's two ways you can do this. One is you can type in Rasppi. So it's Rasppi wifisetup.com. That's option number 1. The second option, if you're more into numbers, you can just type in 10.0.0.1. So 10.0.0.1. Either way, whichever one is easier for you to remember. So now here's our one-time setup. So basically we're going to go here. It's going to detect all the Wi-Fis that are around you. So I'm going to pick my local Wi-Fi here. This is my basement. Then I'm going to put in my password. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll do that offline here. Okay, so I got my password in, and then it's basically saying, okay, I got it. Now I'm going to reboot the Pi. And when the Pi boots up, if everything worked correctly, it is going to be automatically on your network. And assuming it works, it's going to display the IP address on Pixelcade. Okay, so it just blanked out, so that tells me it's connecting. And now it's connected. So it's saying you can get to this from pixelcade.local is one thing you can type, or it's actually giving my IP address, which is 192.168.1.106. So that means everything's good. Text is in green. If we weren't connected, this text would be in red and you'd get an error message basically. So we know we're good. And so now that we're connected, let me show you one other little trick. So let's go back to the iPad, and we're going to go to, hopefully you can see that, I'm not sure if you can see that or not on the camera, but we're going to go to pixelcade.local. /index.html. And again, I'll make that a little shortcut alias in the future. And that's basically going to go to a web UI. It's kind of hard to see. But from here, now I can pick different artwork. Let me zoom in here. And so basically I can dynamically change Pixelcade from any web browser, which is pretty cool. So those are static marquees. I can go here, I can go to animation. So this is quite nice. We've got a lot of animations here. Let's just pick one at random. Okay. First time you run an animation, it's going to display this just a moment one-time decoding message, because basically it has to take that their animated GIFs and convert that into the format that the LED panel needs. So depending on how large the animation is, like that one was a pretty large one, it took a long time, it's going to take a little bit. If I pick another one, let me try to pick one that's smaller. This one I think is smaller. Yeah, so that one went pretty fast. And then if I go back to the same one I did earlier, it's just going to go right away because we already decoded it. So that is the quick and dirty on how to get your Pixelcade set up with the Raspberry Pi Zero. Thanks again for tuning in.